Okay. All right, everyone. Good evening. This is Daylon over here, founder of CuriousCore and a design educator. Today, welcome to our weekly webinar series, which was conceived because many design events were canceled due to COVID. And I realized that there was very little opportunities for designers like us to hang out and to chat and to learn from each other, most importantly, especially in the Asia Pacific scene. So today, I'd like to introduce you to Norman Day. Norman is a product design manager at Grab, and he has 12 years of experience spanning from design to product innovation for companies like BMW, Grab, MSD, Nike, Sephora, and many others. And he is someone who's deeply fascinated by how things are built, broken, and why people make the choices they do. We had actually a very lovely dinner together and had very, very deep conversations about life in general. So I'm definitely looking forward to this one. I think one of the things that we're going to get Norman to talk about as well is his work at Grab, about how he pushed cultural improvement at Grab and how he used metric as one of the ways to do that. As well as, I think Norman is generally a very curious person. So he has produced a live talk show called The Symposium. Cook with strangers in his home. He calls the project Dinner at 335. Run boot camps at General Assembly, where I used to teach, and write articles at medium.com, Norman Tate. So I think we've got a Renaissance man over here tonight. If I could put that label on you, Norman. And yeah, let's start off by sharing a little bit about your work at Grab. You know, what do you do on a day-to-day basis, Norman?
Thanks, Daylon, for having me on the show, and just thanks for everyone kind of just tuning in. Really appreciate it. So I think at Grab, I joined about last year in March. I'm a product design manager. I manage 4 departments with my partners, which is customer support experience, finance, cortex, enterprise, and comms. And my work at Grab, I think a lot of it really starts fundamentally with people. So we look at the psychology of customers, both internal and external. We spend a lot of time understanding the ecosystems of customers and really building, hopefully, thoughtful products and services for them in various places in Southeast Asia, in these 8 different markets, right? My work is predominantly led by building teams that really drive customer and business impact, right? And the area which I kind of really love is those slight intersections in which you look at, human behavior, you look at design, all right, you look at the overall system, and you look at how they play together and how they don't play together, right? And, one of the things that we've been discussing, I don't think it's new, lots of folks here will be familiar with it, is every time you kind of improve the design, what new behaviors are born, right? Whether positive, negative, and so forth. And I think this is kind of an interesting paradigm in which more and more people are discussing and they want to influence. So that's kind of a small gist of what I do at Grab.
Thanks for sharing, Norman. I think when we were having our dinner conversation, you mentioned there was this moment in Grab where you created this shift in mindset, especially the department that you handle is customer service, customer support. Would you mind just like retelling that story? Because I think that was definitely one of the most exciting stories that I heard over that dinner.
Cool, yeah, the dinner was good, it was dim sum. So I think the premise is this, because context is really important, right? So Grab is 7 years old, and I kind of use this story a lot. It's 7 years old, but it's really not, right? 7, 8 years old, gotta get that right. For about 5 years, we were a single service, which was transport. You're familiar with that. Only about 2.5 years ago did we start hiring very aggressively analytics and research people, right? So just think about that for a second. A year and a half ago, we introduced L&D. About 8 months ago, we hired our first diversity and inclusion team, right? So from a cultural context perspective, if you look at those kind of milestones, landmarks, that gives you a lot of clarity of like where the company is, right? And it's actually not 8 years old, even though it literally is 8 years old, right? And the thing that Daylon kind of asking me to kind of share with all of you is within Grab, there's a thing called GES, which is Grab Engagement Score. And in short, it's really the kind of metric that looks at cultural well-being of the organization, right? It's for individual functions like design, which is me, for product for some of you folks, engineering and so forth. So the team that I joined, the very first team that I joined was customer support experience. And when I joined, being really honest, the team was very broken in spirit. It was a little bit toxic. And having joined in March 2019, I learned a lot of historical context of politics and things that might have happened. I was very, very fortunate that my partner, Majeli Rangel, who's the head of product at Grab, who's just fantastic, had joined 2 months before me. So we're both kind of learning. We're both learning the organization, understanding what gives the organization confidence, what takes it away, who are the gatekeepers that hold, influence, how to work with them better, how to bring people together and these elements. And the very beginning, as all new people that come in a company that have ideas, right? People are a little bit suspicious, right? I mean, you might have good intentions, and of course, it's easy to straight away advise people, but we spend a lot of time kind of just listening to people first and understanding the problems. And we identified 2 to 3 key things in which I'll discuss a bit more. So the first was, we didn't really have kind of a long-term vision, right, of how and where we wanted customer support experience to be. We were a little bit a little bit reactive to the market, at least back then. And the team of engineers, product folks, analytics, and so forth, many, many other individuals, right, really wanted something a little bit more long-term. 2, we have a relationship of operations that was not very, very good. In short, they wanted us to rehabilitate that. So what was very interesting was over a span of 1 year, Majeli and I and many other individuals, so not just me, right, did a series of things where we experimented with the town hall. I'll talk about that in a little bit more. We looked at rituals, traditions, and practices to slowly introduce. Some of them failed big time, so I'm happy to share those. Some of them worked better. And within the course of that 1 year, our score was 42 when I joined. And then I think after a year, it was 70. And we were told in H1 2020, that was the biggest uptick curve in the history of Grab. Mind you, there's still a lot of work to do, right? But I think to give you kind of 1 or 2 short stories of what Daylon was asking for. So, folks were saying, we don't feel that we're recognized by our peers. We don't feel like we, there's no peer appreciation, basically. So in the beginning, we had some interesting ideas, and one of them was, instead of giving peer-to-peer appreciation, so me to my direct, which is a designer, or Majeli to her PMs, what if we made it cross-function, right? So that's not revolutionary, totally understand that, but simple enough, right? Because I think if my direct receives feedback, which is relatively quite positive, continuously, it always comes from me, right? But if she hears it from the business owner, from the head of engineering and so forth, it's different. The value and meaning of it is quite different. So when we first started it, in our first town hall, I think we had 1 or 2 peer appreciations. So people didn't gravitate towards it. I think we've got about 45 to 50 people in the team. Right? And we kind of analyze why aren't people giving each other peer appreciations? And then I think what we observed was the leaders, which were us, weren't modeling the behavior of appreciating people openly, thoughtfully, and consistently, and really authentically, right? So imagine a boss that tells you, hey, you should go on holiday, and then they continuously give you a lot of work and they ping you at all times of the day, right? The behavior is not modeled. So that's just one example of how I think in our last town hall, we had close to 24 peer appreciations, cross-functional, mind you, right? And the really powerful act is during town hall, there's a segment where people read out the peer appreciation. So say if I'm appreciating Daylon, who's in engineering, let's just make that up, right? I would read that out to him, to his face, in front of everyone. And just the act of that was extremely powerful because it kind of demystified, I represent design, Daylon represents engineer. Actually, no, we're a big team. we're here for vision and mission, and these things really matter. So that's kind of a long summary of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful statement when you think about it. And the act of appreciation is an act of gratitude. And the fact that you do it publicly, right, and not just privately, which most people do it privately, shows a lot, right? It actually shifts culture. It actually signals what is the right behavior, how I should behave if I'm working in Grab. I was just curious, like you mentioned that there was this shift, what do you think made this like a successful transition and a successful shift, other than the fact that it was a team effort?
So I think at all big shifts, there are pivotal moments where, one, it's a whole series of small wins that continually builds up, right? Two, there are big monumental shifts, which are just tectonical shaping, right? Kind of like an earthquake. I'll share the bigger ones and some smaller ones. So like the town hall is a really small one, and I'll come back to it in a little bit. So we didn't have a really good relationship with our partners, right? And our head of engineering back then, Roger, who's also fantastic, came up with this idea, which is we sit in this office, which is Guaco Tower. They sit in this other office, which is far away from us. What if we take the whole department, the whole product design engineering department, which is like 40 of us, and on Tuesdays, we go to their office, we sit with them, we work there with them, and we're fully present with them, right? And we call this Cinnamon Tuesday because the office is cinnamon, basically, right? So imagine taking 50 people where, we've got to scramble and find desks, all that kind of stuff, like logistical stuff, which is easy to fix. And of course, in the beginning, it's really awkward, right? All of a sudden, like we're fully present and we're in their space. And some folks obviously don't want to be there. But through the course of time, like I think people, one, take advantage of the fact that you're there physically. Access is so easy now. There's no excuse to like not talk, right? And you don't just need to schedule a meeting. You can kind of pop by Daylon's desk and say, hey, can I just talk to you for 5 minutes about this thing? Really easily. And because I know he's going to come back next Tuesday again, a pattern kind of builds, right? And I'm encouraged to talk to him more, right? So that's kind of a bigger tectonic shift. Just taking the whole team and saying, we're going to sit here now and it's going to be a new ritual, right? And hope that it works, right? I'll go back to the town hall for a second, which is, I think for some people, because it's not good to generalize, town halls are really boring. It's usually a powerful man or woman giving a big speech that very few people care about, right? Sometimes, as I said, not always, let's not generalize, sometimes. And actually, town halls are usually about, yes, business updates, product updates, many updates, but it's also really about, we talk about culture, it's really about the community of people, right? And it's easy for me to yabber on for an hour as a leader in front of everyone, but what if we could hear 15 different voices in the town hall? Different people talk about different things. So there's a peer appreciation, one part. There's a sneak peek, talk about the secret, latest, coolest projects that this engineer and this designer and this individual came up with. Why don't we let them talk about it and not Norman and Majelli and all these like leads, right? And yes, maybe in the beginning they're nervous and it's not perfect the way that we want it to be perfect. We don't really know what that means, right? But as we build this as a repetitive aspect of culture, right, of community, people get excited, they want to do it. Next time they have suggestions of their own, they want to try different things. And the town hall becomes a sandbox to experiment with things. Imagine if you could change the format, you could try different elements, introduce mechanisms, game shows, whatever it is, right? Whatever the group, the 50, 60 of you here on the call with us are, how cool would that be, right? Now imagine, like thinking that a little bit further. So I think our head of product really liked this idea. And one of the results we got from the GES score earlier was we don't seem to accept failure very well, or we don't really talk about it. And she came up with this idea called previously Fucked Up Fridays, now called Failure Fridays, because it was a bit explicit, right? I still like the old name. Majelli kind of came up with it. And what was really interesting was we started interviewing internal grabbers who initially were leaders, but really looking at their life and looking at the important failures that shaped them, right? In their careers, but also in their personal lives. And it was extremely powerful and provocative because people shared stories about failure in business, in marriages, whatever that might be, right? And these are quite vulnerable stories that you would not hear in a conference on stage, because people talk about, their successes and whatnot, right? But it really gives you a couple of things. One, it transforms your perception of the fact that this person is fallible, this group head of whoever is fallible, right? Two, I get to learn about this individual a little bit more as a leader and a lot more as a human, as an individual. So like one of our presenters, Mike Trung, who's the group head of product at Grab, I learned, I do this thing where I'm just like investigative. So I get to interview each of these folks, right? And I dug up history on him, and he was previously at EA Games. He produced like, I think, Need for Speed, which some of us played, Crazy Gamer, all this kind of stuff. Started a startup where he was doing interactive books. And Mike doesn't look like that kind of person, right? So learning this whole trajectory of this person and mapping it, and then kind of using that element to humanize him so that people can talk to him and feel more comfortable, is really powerful, and it kind of, other departments that were invited, right, to come and watch us kind of went, there's something that's interesting here that's happening. What is it? The town halls, the Cinnamon Tuesdays, the Failure Fridays, and all these other things. So it's a collision of different components coming together where we're kind of going the same direction. And I think through that's where the score slowly changed. But it's still definitely massive areas in which we can improve. And well-being is one of them. I think everyone's working too hard at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. What I hear from what you said is two things. Number one is like, especially for very senior people, there's this kind of like halo effect over them. And it's about kind of how do we bring them and humanize them in a way by telling their stories, or actively actually sharing and connecting with them through like a common interest or narrative. So that was one thing I heard. The other was the fact that you purposely design moments to introduce openness and dialogue, right? The fact that this is deliberately designed as part of the culture, I think that's quite commendable, because that's not like, say, a HR thing, right? Like HR should do it, or somebody else should do it, or the managing director should do it. It's like you just automatically, because for the good of the team, for the sake that you want to do great work with the team, you actually just like take ownership and just do it. Yeah, this is extra work, isn't it, Norman? Like you spend extra time doing this, like, although it's not part of your job scope.
I feel like it is in my job scope. I mean, it's not in my job specs. If I mean the literal job specs, no, it's not, right? But I had an interesting conversation with Randy, who's the head of design, which you had on yesterday, right? And I guess, and this is a great question for everyone, which is like, if something is not in my job specs, do I not do it? Right? And do I do it only because I want to get promoted? Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not here to judge anyone, right? I'm just saying that, like, what's my motivation for doing something? Right? And that could be for personal gain, and that's okay. But like, culture is such an interesting thing. Daylon earlier said, like, for lots of folks, they feel it's leadership, could be. They feel it's HR. It's outsourced to somebody else, right? When actually, we all play a huge, massive role in shaping it. And if we take Grab out the kind of the lens, right? I mean, look at like your community. So you're all at home right now, I presume, sitting in front of a laptop. You're in a neighborhood, right? And there's a CC nearby. You do participate in shaping the neighborhood, or you don't, right? Again, not to judge, but you can play a role in that. So I think it's not work, Daylon, right? I feel like if I didn't have the autonomy to do this, honestly speaking, I'm being very blunt here, I would not be at Grab. So like I need autonomy to express, experiment, try different things, and be a bit difficult, probably. In a good way, hopefully.
I think it's stretching, but it's stretching in a good way, right? It's for the good of the people that you work with, and also beneficial. I'm quite curious though. Now we have COVID, and earlier you mentioned, hey, you were able to bring like your team of 50 people and sit in the same office as the engineers, and then kind of recreate those moments of like fluid interaction and serendipity. How are you dealing with that right now during COVID?
I think that's a great question. And I'll be lying if I said we're doing fantastic. right? Because one, Daylon, I like leech of energy, of physical energy. You know, like a lot of the events and things I do is based on physicality of people, right? And I'm actually like struggling with this aspect of like home. But what's really beautiful is culture is not led by one person; it's led by many, many people. So what spawned since then is other individuals have kind of stepped up and done interesting things. You know, we've had other leaders to be or co-leads kind of have, whether it's game nights, whether it's dinners with folks, whether it's cooking together, whether it's just a day off of yoga and so forth. And they've kind of just snowballed that. And I've joined some of that. You know, I've kind of like co-shaped some of that. But a lot of the heavy lifting, if I'm to be very honest, is the non-leads. And I think that's really, really powerful, you know. Yeah, so we're not coping great, but I think we're doing the best we can. And I think lots of folks on the call would attest to that as well.
So what I hear you say is that there's been sort of like organic events, right? These are not driven by mandate or in any way, and
Yes.
or by rules and things like that. But people just decided on a ground up basis, hey, let's hang out, right? Let's start to hang out in small gatherings, in small ways to do things that maybe are not slightly related to work, so that there is that moment of respite, other than multiple Zoom calls a day that just talks about work, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a word that I use, which is sort of two words, sorry, a couple of words. So the first is like mutation, which is like, I love watching things mutate over a period of time, right? Which is like you build a mechanism or a framework, say like this, a whole bunch of people, and someone else meets someone, and then they kind of go away and they jam together, and then something else happens daily. You know, and we could be very selfish and said, yeah, we created it, right, on our thing, and we did that. But at the same time, they co-created something else completely different. And I love that mutation, right, of culture, you know. The second is, I think outside of work, people have different mental backpacking journeys. So this, I feel we're all going on a journey together. I'm exploring something quite hopefully deep, fascinating, and thoughtful, right? The cooking with strangers, for example, is a different kind of culture. It's inviting people into the home. They're going through this process where it's quite labored, for example. They don't know each other. Instead of going to watch Avengers on the weekend, which I love, don't worry, right? They are coming to a home to cook with strangers, complete strangers. And the act of that is really powerful because they don't know whether they'll succeed. They don't know whether this stranger across them will like them, right? But they have to collaborate with them and make meaning together for the next 3-4 hours. And that itself is very powerful in a different way, right? With strangers.
Yeah, and I think the last words you said, making meaning, is it kind of gives this little anchor, right? In this storm we're all facing together, called COVID. Anyone, there are a few people tuning in live on Facebook. Welcome, and those of you who just joined us in the last couple of minutes, this is Norman Tay, product design manager at Grab, Southeast Asia's largest super app. And if you have any questions, feel free. Jay's like sharing for you. If you have any questions, feel free to like type them in chat, and I will be happy to answer them. How many of you here, just to ask, how many of you here can relate to what Norman is saying about culture, right? Like, just kind of type in chat, or just give a thumbs up if you can relate to what Norman just shared about culture, and especially the parts about COVID right now. Okay, Ivy gave a thumbs up. Albert gave a thumbs up. Thank you. Right, couple of people: Zoom, Maneka, Jay, and Serene, and so we got a very international crowd. And I think it's amazing that this webinar has started like expanding. And Chip saying support Norman. Lovely. So I was just wondering, like, I know you originally came here. So Chip was saying cooking story reminds me of a hackathon. Oh, it's kind of like a hackathon, isn't it? Like 3 to 4 hours hackathon.
It is, Chip, good one. Didn't think of that, but yeah, great one actually.
Interesting. Yeah. So we're all trying to make meaning here. And I was just wondering, a lot of the people here are interested to join the product design industry and are interested to understand what user experience design is. So I was just wondering, um, what what are some of the general, possibly like general advice you would give to someone who is just looking to join or is kind of new to this industry, knowing that you're also someone who I see that have sort of moved on, like very, very adaptable to change in general. Yeah.
So is that advice, Daylon, for
Yeah.
new people going in, or is
Yeah.
it like
Yeah. Because
mid-career?
like dealing with change and sort of going into a new role and going into UX. Yeah.
So I think if you're going into a new role, I'm going to steal this line from Momo Estrella, who is the head of design from IKEA, right? So I steal a lot of things from people, folks. It's just easier to paraphrase and give credit to those
Sure. Of
because they're
course.
wiser and smarter, right? Which is, if you're starting a new job, poor Momo, I hope I don't butcher this. I think, take note that when you join the company, you have to find out how information flows because it helps create an organization map that isn't based on hierarchy, but on networks of people, right? Uh, find out find out how decisions are made that helps you understand what gives different people and teams different level of degrees of confidence. And I think the second one is really powerful, right? Really, really powerful. And the third is finding out where priorities overlap to help you clearly understand the needs from different people and teams, right? That's if you're joining a company, all right? Just to be clear. So stealing that from Momo. I think if you're going into the industry, and I've spoken to lots of people that are kind of up and coming, right? One is, this sounds like a promotional kind of like segue, right? But I can't say enough. If you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing out a lot because it's the best place to have access to the top 10% of people in the world. All right. So for every Jack Ma, Elon Musk, and so, there are 50 people below them that you don't know the names to, which you should learn. All right. And it's not just access. It's also by understanding the ecosystem of who is on LinkedIn, what they're talking about, you can kind of start identifying patterns that's happening in the industry. So take, for example, if you go to the job part of like LinkedIn or some job portal, right, you might see a large predominant of jobs currently might be in consultancies like BCG, right, or McKinsey, or they could be at banks, or they could be NTUC. And if you start seeing multiple patterns that appear, it means something is happening. So when you do have conversations with recruiters, you should observe and analyze this, right? I think a lot of times what I don't see, and it's not the fault of kind of new upcoming designers, is the ability to understand and leverage the ecosystem. So whether that's aspects of this, General Assembly, Academy XI, many other things out there, Design Singapore, there are tons of support groups that are out there. And you'll see that as you meet individuals and identify things that you are truly curious about, you're able to really upskill and reskill your ability, right? And you gain confidence by having and hopefully challenging some of these individuals. So when you do join a company, your vocabulary hopefully expands a little bit beyond just grab.
Thanks for sharing. I think that's a good tip for anyone who just joins a company. Maneka's sharing a link. Thanks, Maneka. And Joseph's asking some really great questions about communication and workloads and working with people. So we'll take it one by one. You're a design manager, right? So you're kind of in between, say, a senior leader as well as your junior designer. How his question verbatim is, how do we handle tough conversations and manage expectations with stakeholders, especially with senior leaders? Yeah, you're like the sandwich manager. So yeah.
Great question. And I think it's one that gets asked a lot. I think one is really establishing the kind of relationship you want to have with the person above you really early on. All right. I always find not just having coffee chats, because we all have that, but asking the person's remit, right? What is the person in charge of? What are they concerned about? Not just with me and the organization and team, but like what their general concerns about, helps me learn about how the person is. And something which I love what Roger, our previous head of engineering, said was, pay attention to the winds of change. So as the organization changes and evolves and does different things, don't just focus on the features that you're building and obsess over those really kind of like tactical things, right? Because a leader at that level, like 4 levels above me, like Randy, is thinking about strategy, is thinking about different time horizons. And it's quite frequent. Sometimes I observe, design managers, or even, anyone actually, let's not name people, but anyone, right? Kind of always like ask for help continuously, which is good, right? Really, really good. Can't stress that enough. But have you ever considered asking how you can help this person? Actually, Randy, how can I help you? What can I do to help, like accelerate something that you're doing? And there's this 3-question thing which I use, right? Which is the first, which is pretty standard. How are you set up for success? And I think we ask that of ourselves quite a lot. 2, which we ask ourselves a little bit less, how are we set up for failure? You can be set up for failure, right? It's a real thing. And the 3rd, which we should think about a lot more, which we don't think about, which technically answers the first 2, is how are we setting others up for success? Right? I mean, in design, we're kind of culture vampires, and we're in the business of persuasion, and we understand customers. So where's that understanding for employees, internal staff members? And I think, Joseph, kind of just to summarize the ending of this answer is, by understanding these key levers that the individual cares about, then I can translate that when I have conversations with my directs and prime them that something might be happening in 2 months' time. It's really good. Get excited. Something not so good is coming. Can't fully share it yet, but they're primed. And what this does is that we become less reactive as a team and more like, oh yeah, okay, like things change, right? Not just because of COVID, but because of a great deal of many other things. And from calibrating the winds of change, we now have the ability to decide when we go from gear 1 to gear 3 of operating, right? And go from gear 3 to gear 2 to gear 1 again and switch it back up again, because we don't always operate one particular gear. And if you're always driving impact, I'll just summarize that, then it's clear to the leader.
I think that's a beautiful analogy to use the term winds of change. And it almost feels like as you're explaining this, you're like this rock in the winds of change, right? Or at least you're trying to be the rock, and you're providing your team that stability and that predictability, so that they don't get too reactive, as I hear. But at the same time, you become the rock of your senior leader and senior manager as well. So like you're supporting them. You're literally the foundation supporting them and their work. Yeah. So yeah, that's a very interesting answer. And adapting along with the winds of change. The second question Joseph asked was, as a design leader, how do you manage different expectations and working styles from other departments, because they might be speaking a different language, right? Say business or engineering or marketing. And I think he's asking in the context of like, especially when it comes to workload, right? Like how can we protect our designers and protect them from being like overworked? Yeah.
Great question. I'll try to like break that up into a couple of pieces there. So the first is, I think, understanding and working with other teams. And second is kind of like protecting and making sure we're performing at a particular level. So I'm really strange, right? In the aspect which is, whichever company you're always going to hear working with so-and-so team is very difficult, right? And if you know that now at the age of 20 and you know that now at the age of 60, which is working with other people are difficult because our KPIs are different and everything, then how do you overcome that? And I think part of that is really understanding, as what Momo said earlier, right? In stealing from his quote, what gives people confidence and what takes it away. And one of the fundamental things that takes it away is not being visible and transparent. right? Whether intentionally or unintentionally, just not giving people visibility or transparency, right? Two is if you see that an individual or a team is a bit deficient in an area, let's just say they're not very data driven, instead of giving them shit, right? Ever thought about how you could make that learning L&D thing for them actually? What if you told the head of that department, hey, I got this person, she's from analytics, she's very interesting, and she actually wants to do this short 1-2 hour session with your team, right? And really take marketing to this other new level, right? Really look at how we can start personalizing and all these other things. And the person can choose yes or no, right? And they choose no, that's okay. But we do that enough times where we're proactive and coming from hopefully a positive reinforcement aspect, the person kind of goes, wow, this guy's really invested in like helping us improve or build new capability within our team. Even though he's so busy, like what does he want? Well, what I want is just better coherence of how to work together, right? So that when we do work together, I don't always have to be in the room, because now we have relationships that is not just anchored on Norman Tate, but on all these other individuals that have a shared language of spending more time together and understanding that aspect of what gives each other confidence, what takes it away, right? What really raises the bar as we go from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4, right? Beyond our KPIs. The second part of your question, Joseph, about protecting our designers. So I don't protect my designers. I am probably a pretty like demanding design manager. Not demanding as in like I ask them to do a lot of work. I actually ask them to do very little work. One of the things I always ask them to do is, if you see a poor business or product brief, do not work on it. If the customer business problem statement is not clear, do not work on it. If the metrics review is not clear, don't work on it. Push back and challenge the individual that put it forward to you, right? You don't work on anything which isn't clear or is a bit like ad hoc-ish and in the air, right? Unless, of course, it's from Exco or someone from AT, from Anthony Tan, right? But intent of this is to say, look, your task list is always never ending. I don't want you to get into this mindset of task-based operating. You can't do that, right? That's what certain parts of your job is. But a huge part of your job is understanding how to work better. And you can only do that if you do a couple of things. You assess things better and go, this isn't a good business problem statement. How can we rewrite this and make sure we're solving the right problems, so we don't continually launch things which are kind of crap or not well thought out, right? And I did this in the beginning with them, and I coach them how to do this. And over time, all I'll do, I'll just sit back and I'll observe. And sometimes they might fumble, but they build their own vocabulary and expression to figure it out. And what it does is that it empowers them to be business acumen minded, really be customer centric, really be data driven, really lead by both like empathy as well as like curiosity, right? And they become like their own leaders. And it sounds very cheesy lah, like it sounds like from a book, right? But it's like the truth, which is it starts with the problem. And if you have poor problems, then everything else kind of doesn't matter after that.
As you were sharing this, I smiled because it really reminds me of I think what an engineer told me. I think that the best code is actually not I'm butchering it, but basically like the best product to code or the best thing to code is actually not to code it. If there's no need for it, then don't do it. So yeah, I think that's such a great philosophy to embed and to get people to just take a step back, right? Because if not, then we're just in this mode like we're just fighting little fires, whereas maybe we should be understanding what's the source of that fire, right? And just trying to quell that.
And Daylon, I'll just add one really small thing there, which is like in companies, I feel like we don't think about the culture of disposability enough. The amount of work that we create or work on, and then it either doesn't get developed for whatever reason, or like we just change halfway because of poor planning or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you actually calculate that, like year in, year out, month by month, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's not like
It's
a
a lot
bad
of
thing.
waste.
A lot of
Yeah,
waste, right?
exactly.
And it's really sad.
Unfortunate but true. Okay. Yeah. Joseph says, love how you build a safe space for your designers. And Jay, I think your colleague Jay is asking, how would you handle designers that are discontent with their current role and may want to switch their role to a PM? I'm guessing it's product manager. Switch teams or leave the company. How do you empower this designer to stay the course? Do you change their projects? Do you handhold them? What would you do?
I think that's really tough, Jay. Thanks for asking that, but that's a really tough question because it's so much on context, right?
Mm,
Which is like I don't know enough about the product or deeply,
mm,
right, to give advice. And like Daylon knows this, I said this when we had dim sum. I'm not a big fan of giving advice because it's kind of free, right? And
there's
I'm
no
actually
stake.
there's
There's
no
no skin in the game.
yeah. I'm not interested in like actually the questions, which is actually you want to change from design to a PM. Like what motivates you? Why are you doing that? And they might go because it's a new role. Yeah, okay, but why do you want to do that? And what were the triggers or the
Mm,
root causes that made you think about that? Right. And as you do, maybe one of the first things I might do, again, not advice, is I might identify really good PMs within the organization and say you should go and talk to them, really get a sense of the ecosystem from different departments throughout Grab and understand their roles and shortcomings, like all the stuff that Joseph asked earlier. Ask those questions to them, like really difficult questions. Understand what the role is, what it entails, understand the culture, understand the commitment. PMs work so hard. They do, right? Understand the sacrifices, right? Understand that exchange that happens. And once you get a big, strong understanding of that, one is that you'll see whether you like the role or whether you like the culture of the role within the organization. And if you can do that with me and the folks I recommended it to you, right, you could technically do it with other folks outside of Grab as well, right? And you're kind of doing the same thing which we stated much earlier, which is you're mapping the ecosystem and building your knowledge, and hopefully leveraging that. Yeah, I hope that helps. Short answer, but
yeah. Hope that helps, Jay. And as you were saying that, I think just to reference what you said before, I feel like you're putting it into practice as well, right? The three questions you said: how are we set up for success? How are we set up for failure? How are we setting up others for success? Like I think you're practicing that as you're talking about these approaches, and I think that's beautiful. Um, wow, we got a lot of questions tonight. Joseph's asking, how do you build a great design team? Meaning, how do you hire or fire, right? And there was also a similar question someone asked, like, how can I join a Grab, a company like Grab? What qualities and attributes do you look for and or will not accept? Yeah.
okay. Thanks, Joseph. I love you. You're flooding the feed. I appreciate it. I think first question. So, how do you build a great design team? I don't know whether I've achieved that yet, to be honest. All right, let's be very clear about that. I've built different teams, and I think our perceptions. I know Joseph's not asking this, but our perception of successes are very different. I want to build a team which is fully not just capable and resourceful, but really changes the mental model of how designers work in web. So I'm trying to build like Swiss Army knives, an individual who's a service designer, who's Sujong, who's truly wonderful, but also like her weak spots might be content or something else, and she works on that. And over a period of time, she's able, because of service design, right, it's end to end, right, she's able to leverage these different skill sets, user research, content design, and so forth, to really like be a much stronger hybrid designer. And my job is kind of like to make me invalid, as I said, not in the room, right? So I think part of that is like understanding these individuals and how they gain confidence themselves. And over a period of time, I ask these questions, Joseph. So I might say, after our first year, how much influence do you think you have within the team? And you might answer whatever it might be. You might say, oh, I think I have a certain amount of influence. Great. How much influence do you think you have within the organization? Oh, obviously a little bit less. Okay. So when I speak to you 1 year from now, how do we change that for you? And you might go like, what do you mean by influence? Why would I want it and whatnot? Well, influence, you're trying to influence decisions within the organization, right? Whether product, whether organization, whether culture, and so forth. And I think understanding that designing products is only one part of your job, like what Daylon asked earlier, culture seems like it's extra work. It's not extra work, right? Because by building great culture within the organization, it allows me to leverage L&D. It allows me to leverage all these different partners within the organization to improve the way that we operate together. People are happier. So it means that there is a bit better attrition rate. People stay longer at Grab, right? Which is what we want, obviously. People build new skills and they transfer that and they scale that. They scale wisdom throughout Grab, which is fantastic. People then step up to be leaders. And as they step up to be leaders, maybe they want to build a culture roadmap. We've got business roadmaps, we've got tech roadmaps, we've got product roadmaps. Where's a culture roadmap for the organization? Are we waiting for HR again to do that for us? Or can someone from design that? That'd be kind of cool, right? So I think that aspect of like really building really efficient but dynamic individuals and then getting them to think very deep, thoughtful questions that is for their career, not just at Grab, hopefully gives them insane amount of confidence to not just like be with me, but to experiment and try different things, right? How do I hire and fire? That's a hard one. So I think I hire, like most people, I just interview people, but I have kind of an interesting way of doing it. I spend a lot of time in the first interview, kind of like almost not looking at work. I think for me last time, if you passed in through the door, your work is good enough, right? Your design fundamentals are there. But there's kind of like 5 specific qualities that I do want in an individual. And I'm not trying to build like a mini me, but these are qualities that I do like. So I think business and product acumen is super important, right? I think if you don't have an understanding of that, in every room in which you are discussing and debating with someone, you're always not going to be in a good spot. Even if you're super customer centric, right? Because the business still needs to drive impact. And it's not binary. You can do both. You can be customer centric and business acumen minded. You should be both, right? Second, and I said this a lot earlier, and I won't elaborate too much on it, ecosystem sensing. If you build a designer who is curious and empathetic, and this is another one of the qualities, and they go out throughout the org to really reach out to different individuals to improve the way that we work, and they do that self-sufficiently without me, that's amazing. I'm serious. So ecosystem sensing is very important, both within Grab, but also outside of Grab. It tells me how you can be resourceful with the resources that you have, even if that's super limited, right? Third is customer centricity, which I think is quite self-explanatory. Fourth is strong design fundamentals, which is quite clear. I think we don't need to elaborate on that. And the fifth is curiosity and empathy, not just for our customers, but to Daylon's earlier question, sorry, Joseph's earlier question, also for our employees and our bosses, right? Especially now during COVID. Firing, I'll chat with you offline.
Yeah. Yeah, we can take that offline after this conversation. So that's a great way. And I think it sounds like it's your colleague Razil is sort of vouching you on chat by saying, hey, you really practice what you're saying, and people do want to join your team.
Thanks, Razil. I'll pay you the $100 later.
And I think it's such a great point you're making about how it's important to us as designers, not just to do the pixel perfect work well, or even to do the thinking behind the work well, but also to explain it and to communicate it to people and to build trust with others. Because if we can't even build trust, then we can't actually work together. We can't actually deliver the best experience for the customer. I think that was also a point when I was having a a private lecture with Randy and our coaching clients on that. Like that was also something that was that strongly came across in his chat. Sylvan was asking earlier about town hall. How long did it take to see the changes in culture after the first town hall? And the second question was, how progressive was it? I guess we'll answer the first one.
Sure. I think about 4, Sylvan. So like, typical town hall, business updates, product updates, design updates, but it's all like numbers, all like facts, right? Facts, which I could send an email, really, right? So why are we physically present with each other? And I think it only started changing when the culture part, the community part, the second segment kind of kicked in. And yeah, it takes a little bit longer, the town hall, but people are like laughing, they're having a good time, they chat with each other. All the invisible lines are happening. And I think it's really powerful where you can see it physically happen. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I think we chat about this during dinner is also one of the things I learned from this Swedish while I was studying there for a bit. They mentioned something about how more openness leads to more trust, and more trust leads to more openness, and how that's a virtuous cycle, right? That actually just helps people to work better together, or make meaning together, like what you were saying earlier. So perhaps that, Sylvan, is really dependent on how much openness are you designing for your team, or how are you designing the space, or leading the team so that this openness can happen and people feel a sense of safety, right? As what Joseph mentioned earlier.
Daylon, can I just share something there, which I think will be super valuable for Sylvan, right? Which is about what you just shared from what you learned in Sweden, which is going back to model behaviors. So, when we talk about vulnerability and openness, and that sounds very nice, right? What does that look like actually?
Sure.
If Randy, who's my boss, gives me feedback during, our every year kind of feedback sessions, imagine if as a lead, I share that with my directs and I say, these are the 2-3 things like he gave me feedback on, I need to grow in these areas, right? Imagine how that mindset changes them and they go, oh, wow, he's sharing these areas that he is not so good at, right? He needs to be maybe a bit more calm during certain stakeholder meetings. Don't know, whatever it might be, right? Imagine if Randy, who's my boss, shares his growth areas with me. And every time I'm in a room with him and I see him kind of like steering off course, I remember what he shared with me, maybe I can help him with his growth area. So model behaviors is super important in actualizing this. If not, it's just a manifesto with nice words.
Yeah, thanks for kind of like adding a little bit more to that, and an actionable example on how we can actually practice that. Because I think a lot of what you're saying is kind of like exercising a muscle, right? It's like if you don't practice it, it doesn't happen. Yeah. So Maneka is asking, if there's one team that has an ideal culture set up, how do you duplicate the best practices into other teams? So let's say you've really successfully done to a fair degree what you wanted to do. How do you scale it to the rest of the organizations who may have a different way of working? Yeah.
You hijack it, Manaka. You partially hijack it. But I mean, in all seriousness, I think we're all learning. So if you figure it out, do let me know, Manaka. We'll connect on LinkedIn. I think part of that is understanding avenues where you do obviously surface it to everybody else, right? And you say, what if we try this? And you might get 3/4 of the room going, yeah, don't really like it. Okay, understood. So an approach that I tried regarding the cross-functional peer appreciation, which was quite interesting, I'll share with everyone here, was I shared this with other leads, right? And the reception was excitable, but kind of lukewarm. Totally understandable, right? And then I spoke to their partners, which is the head of engineering, head of whatever it is, right? Which is, can you give some time, just 30 seconds, to make a short video to peer appreciate somebody who's in design, right? And they came together then to really make this happen together. and it became osmosis. So it's kind of like spreading it quite wide, planting seeds and spreading them out quite wide. And for the folks that don't do it, Manaka, you can't really control that, right? Because I think that's also culture, a culture of not ready, a culture of maybe different belief, right? And you can't let them operate the way that they want. But duplicating best practices is really about understanding, again, how people work. And maybe I contextualize the way that I did this for how they might want to do it within their team. And that only works if I speak to them a bit more, right? But hijacking also works, really.
Yeah, with regards to your earlier point, Joseph saying, because Joseph used to work at DBS, they actually practice confessing their growth areas with each other. And he said a result of that was because there was a visionary leader to help kickstart and role model that. So leaders play a very important role in modeling the right behaviors in an organization. So Jay's saying, you're at ease and always eloquent at debating with other stakeholders, but how do you level up the team in those soft skills that may not be acquired and maybe they're not so comfortable with the debate, right? And especially if there's language barriers or if there's anxiety issues, yeah. Because we have to get the point across as designers, we have to communicate. So like how can we help someone who's not as eloquent or not as comfortable? Yeah.
I think part of that process for individual that is a little bit less confident, at least at that period of time, right, is helping them prepare. So if a meeting is coming up, and this is pretty straightforward, right, really physically rehearsing with them again and again and again the week before. And I've done this previously, like 2-3 hours, 4 hours the week before, right, really helps them. Getting them, as you're coaching them, to be very specific and concise when they're presenting. So if they're presenting as opposed to debating, because that's two different kind of things happening, right? If you're presenting, be very specific and concise, because the more you ramble on and if you're not confident, it's just not going to work in your favor, right? No one likes a rambler, let's be honest, right? At least too much rambling, that is, right? And if you're specific and concise, it lets people digest what you're saying, and then you pause, right? And you get them to acknowledge that pausing or quietness in a room is okay. So kind of like an interview, many times people feel like silence is horrible. It's not. Think about when you go on a date. You can't yabber the whole time you're on a date, right? You do have moments of like silence. So learn to be comfortable with that, because it allows people, as you're quiet or they are quiet, they're digesting what you're saying, and then they might talk to you, and then you debate. And the powerful thing about debating, which we have kind of a tag team system, which is, one is if you can answer it, please do so, right? Because you have all the expertise to answer it. Two, if you don't have the expertise in the room, you just say, I think Albert would be in a better place to respond to this, because it's about user research. And actually he did a research last week, right? So you kind of pass the baton, and then you let that person talk, right? Because that person is not alone in the room, right? And after the session has happened, obviously like congratulate them, give them really good feedback about what happened, but also be very specific about how they can do it a little bit better, right? And I think these micro tweaking factors, and if they stumble or whatever might be their shortcomings, right, you'll see that it's a pattern, and patterns can be fixed. But if the person is not open-minded to feedback, it's a big problem really, right? Regardless of the coaching that I can give the person. So
Certainly.
yeah.
And I think Joseph gave you a big heart, saying it sounds like being a coach over just being a manager. Yeah, so Chari appreciates that Joseph asked this question. Maneka was just adding a little bit more to the conversation, saying at Property Guru, they have an appreciation app that is company-wide, and they translate it into reward points. Wow, they actually make that extrinsic reward so that the appreciation are more than just words.
Very cool.
Fascinating. Lovely. And thanks for sharing all your culture stories as well, those in the chat, and Norman, certainly appreciate that. Unfortunately, we have come to, it's 9 p.m. in Singapore already, so we have come to sort of the end of this webinar. I'm sure we can go on for another hour. But also Norman's kind of sick, so let's give him some rest and not overwork him. He has a work day tomorrow. Yeah, Serene, thanks for sharing as well. Yeah, how many there are designers here in the room? Just let me ask in general, who doesn't feel comfortable debating, right? Just kind of raise your hand or give a thumbs up or something like that. Right. Wow, there's a lot of people in the room who are not very confrontational. Yeah. And doesn't feel comfortable debating. Okay, people are giving different emojis. Thank you. Jay say he debates with you all the time.
He does.
Yeah. Okay. Razel's like, okay, sometimes I don't feel comfortable debating. Yeah, I think it's also important to pick your battles. You don't have to always debate. It's for what purpose? So thank you so much for attending tonight's webinar. And Norman, is LinkedIn the best way that they can connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way, folks. I'm most active there.
Yeah.
And you can just message me and we'll have a good chat.
Awesome. So yeah, feel free to reach out to Norman on LinkedIn, and I'm sure he'll be happy to connect. Just mention that you got to know him from this talk. If you do talk, please share this with your friends. Feel free to take a screenshot or something, and let your friends know. CuriousCore.com. It's kind of like, whoops, it's where you can sign up for the webinar and future conversations with design leaders like Norman, and just to understand about the UX industry in Asia Pacific. Next week we have Samuel. Samuel is ex-Samsung, and Norman very kindly introduced me to a friend of his. And,
hey.
And we'll have a chat with Samuel about design and foresight, right? Because Samsung is one of those rare organizations that's based in Asia that managed to use design as their strategic advantage to have a market leadership position. And how does a very, very mature design organization think about design? I think that's the kind of conversation we're going to have. So I think one of the other things is we're going to sort of get off live on Facebook, and after which I will we can have a sort of like a fireside chat. Feel free to share your appreciation. Thank you. It's already streaming in, Norman. It's quite a lot of appreciation for for what you shared today. But
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
so much, everyone, for attending. And we'll catch you very, very soon. Take care.
Thanks, Daylon, as well.
Lovely.